Welcome to the podcast, Abby. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. We were chatting before we clicked record, and I feel like I do this very often with my guests. Like, I'm so excited to meet them and actually be chatting with them in like person, I guess, like virtual versus chatting on Instagram DMs. And I have a tendency of like just kind of jumping into like why I'm excited. So I'm like, let me click record and then we'll get into it. I need to like slow down a little bit. But why don't you give an introduction of who you are and what your background is for those that don't know?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm equally excited for the conversation. My background is kind of a little bit all over the place, but I have spent most of my career in corporate America in sales positions and eventually working my way up to the C suite of a real estate investment company. So, lots of stressful moments along the way, and then add motherhood on top of it, and it was kind of a recipe for burnout. I've experienced a lot of cycles of burnout over my career and through motherhood, and eventually decided, there I had this feeling like I just wanted to kind of turn around and maybe help some people that were in my starting position of where I felt like, how in the world am I going to do any of this? And kind of show them what I've learned and what I've, learned not to do and so forth over kind of the course of this little, adventure I've been on researching and figuring out like how to take better care of myself, I guess you could say. So I have, Abby Calabrese coaching and my Instagram, which is what I think you're referring to, where I'm sharing tips and stories. And even if it's just to make someone feel like, okay, this isn't just me, then I feel like that's exactly what I'm.
Yeah, I love that story so much, and I can relate so much to the burnout. I recently quit my corporate job and am a content creator. I'm a small business owner, and for some reason, I thought when I quit my corporate job that like the burnout would end and I would just have more balance in my life. Even though I'm still technically working, I just had it in my mind that like it's because I work in corporate, it's because I'm working for someone else, and there's all these demands and I have to work this strict schedule. But in reality, I'm still burned out 3 months after quitting my corporate job. So I think it's something more so with me rather than working in corporate. So
That was a
why
hard
don't
discovery for me too. I was like, okay, it's this job, it's this boss, it's this
yeah.
environment, it's this, and then all of a sudden it's following me everywhere I go, and you have to take a second and say, okay, so what is really going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited for the conversation because I still haven't like figured out like that secret sauce of like avoiding burnout because I'm there. And before we jump in even further, I want to ask you this too. But the name of the podcast is I didn't sign up for this. I want to start asking all my guests like what is one thing that you didn't sign up for?
So I just love the name of the podcast because I feel like I say this a lot in my life. And when I find that I'm saying it, it's you have an idea or your expectation of what something's going to be. And then you get into it, and the reality of it is just like, oh my gosh, again, I didn't sign up for this. The one that really comes to mind right now, though, is just the utter chaos of motherhood.
Yes.
It's like
Okay.
beyond. So I feel like I, type A personality, high achieving. I can organize. I can, get a company together. I can, sell millions of dollars of software. I can take in investments and multi millions. But you can't get a 3-year-old to follow
Right.
anything. So
Right.
all the rules kind of just go out the window. And it's just, there's no way to plan for everything that's going to happen. There's no way to anticipate. And I had this vision in my mind of what motherhood was going to be. And it is just so far from that. And I heard someone say, do you like roller coasters? Okay, how do you feel about emotional roller coasters? Because in a matter of minutes, I can go from, I can't do this, I actually can't do this, to, oh my gosh, that is the cutest thing I've ever seen. And I'm filled with joy, and it's up and down and all over the place. And I just feel like there was no way to anticipate how motherhood and being a mom of two little boys was just going to be kind of all over the place and chaotic.
Yeah, I can relate to that so much. I feel like the expectation I have of motherhood and then what the reality actually is, they're two completely different things. My world was turned upside down. I'm like, wait a minute. No one told me it was going to be like this. I thought
Yeah.
it was going to look like a magazine spread. I thought it was going to look amazing, feel amazing, be in love with my baby at all times, never get exhausted, never. And the emotional roller coaster, like with my 4-year old right now, I literally, it's just like constantly emotionally regulating her. And then also, I'm trying to emotionally regulate myself because I feel like I go into fight or flight. And then, but you're trying to like teach them because you're their parent and you're trying to teach them these skills. But it's just like time after time all day long. And by the end of Sunday night, I'm like, I am ready for Monday morning. Like the weekends are harder.
And being on the other side of it, I remember being in my 20s and I'm working in an office, and some of the people that were 10, 15 years older than me would come in on Mondays and be like, all right. And I'm like, what is, like, I would judge them. I'd be like, wait, you don't want to be around this kid. Like, I couldn't, you have no idea of what that feels like, that you love them with your whole heart, but you're also like, get out of here. Like, I can't, I
Yeah.
need you to go back to camp. I need you to go to daycare. I need space. The overstimulation is real.
Yeah.
But like you said, like, they're dealing with all of their big feelings, and you're trying to navigate that. But also you have all these feelings in it. And it's a lot. It's way
Yeah.
more than I ever anticipated.
Yeah. Well, there's comfort in knowing that we're not alone. So I love having these conversations. And I feel like whenever I ask a guest that question, like 9 out of 10 times, that's what their response is. It's just like the transition into motherhood and just not knowing like what the hell is going on. So there's always comfort in that. I always appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that also probably ties into one thing that you talk a lot about. And when you actually reached out to me through Instagram, you DM'd me. And I do get quite a bit of requests from people pitching themselves and saying, hey, I would love to be on the podcast, and this is what I do. This is what I talk about, and this is a topic. I get a lot of those requests, and just because I do have to be a little bit selective of who I invite on the podcast because I just have one episode a week. And so, but when you reached out to me, your message really stuck out to me because you had mentioned sobriety and how alcohol maybe had affected your experience with burnout and being that type A personality. And I haven't had a guest on the podcast yet to really talk about that. And my partner, my ex-husband, and I'm now dating him again. He has been sober for almost a year now. And so I'm a little bit familiar with that. And obviously, I'm very familiar with burnout. And so that's kind of what stuck out to me. So I want to talk about, alcohol and your sober journey. I don't know if you use that term like sober or sober curious. I know there's a lot of like buzzwords out there,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about that. So can you talk about your journey, your sober journey, and kind of what brought you to being
So
sober?
absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, just going back to when, first started drinking, it was your typical end of high school into college. All felt very normal. You're doing what everybody else is doing, and, partying and everything like that. Nothing really kind of started to feel a little off until after kids, to be honest. So once we had our first, we were kind of, I affectionately called our house baby jail, because you, after the baby's asleep, you still have to stay home, right? And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, how can we make baby jail a little bit better? And before that, even when we were married and living together and everything, we lived in New York City. We didn't really have alcohol in the apartment because your apartment's so small, first of all. And then you're just always kind of out, you use the bars and everything as like your extended living room, so to speak. So it was never something where I had alcohol in my apartment. It didn't really take up too much headspace. I definitely was out and drinking a lot, especially now in hindsight, 2020. It was a lot, but it didn't feel like it was like encroaching in my life. But after my first, all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, I'll just get some wine to put in the house. And then once, my first was asleep, have, some drinks or whatever. So it started to then become something at home, that was like a big pivotal moment in my mind. But again, just kind of continued on. It wasn't really anything. Had my second son, and it was during COVID. And
Mm.
I feel like I hear a lot about this now that I'm in this world and hearing about moms going through this journey. But the pandemic, for a lot of moms, that's kind of what happened. You're stuck at home. You have no sense of escape. Even, right now we're talking about the overwhelming, feelings of motherhood and wanting to escape and all this stuff. Now put a pandemic on top of it.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of people, I mean, alcohol, they deemed essential. Alcohols, liquor stores could stay open during everything. I found myself going to like these big box. Moved out of New York City by then. So these big box like wine stores and literally buying wine by the case and was just like,
Oh.
okay, like we'll have this in our house. And still nothing felt that weird to me. But eventually, when you kind of are drinking, then, it'd be like turned into that nightly, oh, I'm cooking dinner. I'm going to have some wine. And then, oh, I'll have one glass with dinner. And then, okay, well, now the bottle, there's just a little bit left. It creeps up on you. And so before I knew it, it was drinking almost every day, drinking multiple glasses of wine. And where I finally was like, hold on a second, is I felt awful. I would wake up and I would literally feel sick. And it was like hangover, yes, but also this like mental shame, disgust, irritability. I mean, when I learned, and I'll go through this, but once I learned about the science behind everything, it was like so clear that that was the alcohol, in my system and trying to get out of my system and self regulate. And I was putting my body through hell. But just that feeling of every day waking up feeling awful, but then your body is craving that because that'll, restabilize you in terms of dopamine and how you're feeling and everything. So by the end of the evening, I forget all about how I felt in the morning. Great, it's time to cook dinner and have that glass of wine. And I was really relying on that. I would find myself, if we were deciding where to go to lunch, well, I wonder if they'll have like cocktails there, or, all right, we're going to go down to the beach, but am I going to be able to like get a should we bring stuff? It was just starting to like impede all of my thoughts, and it was becoming a lot to manage. And I would try this moderation game of like, okay, I'll only have this or only have that. And first of all, that's exhausting. But second of all, you like without any alcohol, and then you 2 drinks in are going to make very different decisions. And I feel like I was like letting myself down, and it was just it was snowballing, and it was feeling like it was getting a little bit out of control. And where I'll tell you this. So how I started down this journey though is I started listening to some like sober mom podcasts, and I didn't know what to think about them. Like I even just kind of like would scroll by them and be like, I don't know if that's my jam. But then I started listening, and one in particular, the Sober Mom Life. She's awesome. Her guests are awesome. And she just had real moms. She calls them like real sober mom chats. And it was like they were telling my story. I could not believe how much I had it. People from the same, from New York, people, lawyers, doctors, like executives, all kind of around the pandemic, moms falling into these same patterns. And I just felt so understood. But also, I was like, oh, geez. So this means I'm going to have to like really take a look at this.
Yeah.
So along with the podcast, I did kind of dive into Quit Lit, which is what they call it, which is, it could be memoirs or just kind of stories around alcohol. And not only are I love personal interest stories, but it was just, I really connected with them. I loved a lot of the people that were writing them. I'm like, these are my people. And I just really, it started to resonate with me a lot, kind of hearing all of those stories.
Yeah, I feel like with alcohol, there it's very romanticized and
Oh,
normalized. It's in, I mean, movies. We see it on social media all of the time, and it's so easy to use as a crutch. And by the way, like I enjoy a glass of wine. I enjoy a cocktail.
totally.
There's like this whole wine mom culture, and there's no shame here with that. Like everyone knows their own story and how they're able to manage it and like what works for them. So just want to say that kind of up front. But it's very easy, and I've noticed even in myself, it's easy to not moderate it, or it does kind of creep up on you. When I even evaluate like my drinking patterns now versus when I had kids, or even just after my first, same thing. Like we didn't really have alcohol in the house, and we don't now. But a couple years ago we did, and it was just more casual, and it just kind of escalated slowly over time. And then you're looking at this like, oh wait, why am I kind of gravitating towards that, or why am I having these thoughts of like, is there going to be alcohol, or I feel like I need that. I feel overwhelmed by my kids, I need a glass of wine to relax, or self-regulate. That it's very easy to fall into that. But it is also very romanticized, and there's also a lot of shame with alcohol abuse, or being sober. I know some people don't like to use the word like alcoholic, but if they choose to be sober, I think the assumption is that, oh, they're an alcoholic. There's a story there. What's there? Did you experience any shame once you decided that you wanted to be sober?
Well, so here's the thing. I had the anticipated worry about all of that because I know how I thought about it. I was the one who, if you showed up, I'd be like, what do you mean you're not drinking? Wait, tell me about this, or like whatever. And I would be asking all these questions. That was me because I was uncomfortable with my relationship with alcohol. What I have
Mm,
found is the ones that dig usually they're asking because they're unsure of their relationship with alcohol. For the most part,
gotcha.
people that are like you said, like I like a glass of wine here, a cocktail. First and foremost, there's zero judgment. I'm around alcohol all the time, so we can have it in our house. I go out, like there's zero judgment. This is me. This is my own personal journey with it. But yeah, I was terrified. I was like, everyone's going to think I'm an alcoholic. They're going to think I have this. And my version of an alcoholic, or my vision of it in my head, is like a guy under a bridge with a brown paper bag. Like it is,
Right. Yep.
it's, I think just our generation, how we were raised around it, the word, the stigma. What I've found, first of all, most people don't even notice. They don't
Yeah.
even care. And then if you do get into it, they're intrigued, they're proud of you. There's so many NA options now on the market. I don't know if you notice it. I notice it all the time, but on menus and cocktail bars and everything, there's like a
Yeah.
whole section for NA drinks. And they're beautiful drinks, and they have so much flavor, and um, it's awesome. And so a lot of people will be like, wait, I want to try that, or where do how do you put this together, or whatever. And so it's just been such a different experience than what I thought, and honestly why I put it off for so long. I was so worried I was going to be like the weird one, or come
Mhm.
across as like I have this huge issue, or just whatever. And it just has not been that experience at all. It's been a really, really positive experience.
I love to hear that. And I feel like because I've also seen, a lot of content around like sober curious, like there's a spectrum.
Yes.
Just because you choose to not drink alcohol doesn't mean that you identify as an alcoholic, or that you are an alcoholic, or like you hit rock bottom. That's like a
Yeah.
common thing too, is like you got to hit rock bottom before you like go to AA, and like, but there's a spectrum of people. And when they're realizing, hey, maybe this isn't serving me anymore. Maybe I don't feel like I'm showing up as the best mom or employee, and I just don't feel well. So why am I participating in this when the next morning I feel like crap? And then it's just this cycle of continuing to drink. So you get back to normal. And then,
I
before you know it, you're drinking every day.
I know. And I felt in some way like, and on the Sober Mom Life, Suzanne talks about this. It's like some people, this was definitely me, feel like they don't qualify to cut out alcohol. Cause I'm like,
Yeah.
well, nothing. drastic has happened, nothing awful or catastrophic, or I haven't hit that rock bottom. So it almost felt like I didn't qualify to stop drinking. And I know that might sound crazy
Yeah.
to some people, but for the people that feel like that, they're probably nodding their heads right now. I was like, well, can I just quit drinking? Like, is that an option? And
Yeah.
so the more I listened to other people's stories and how they went through it, and I had to really warm up to the idea. But then I got so excited at the idea of like, I can stop this before it has to get to some rock bottom or
Yeah.
some horrible thing that might happen because of it, because it wasn't heading anywhere good.
Yeah.
I just feel so grateful for that. And so I love this conversation, this sober, curious conversation that's happening, because I think that that's going to alleviate a lot of these horrible things that happen that then cause people to stop drinking and just be like, hold on a minute, like I can take control of this and
Yeah.
kind of get ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah. How long have you been sober for?
And what's so funny too, I thought forever I would know the day. Like at first it
Yeah.
was like 47 days, 75 days, whatever. And so it'll be a year in November. Um,
Okay.
so a
Awesome.
200 and some day, I don't know, something like that. But it's
Yeah, that's great.
how I started also to kind of help these social situations, because obviously people are going to ask. It's
Yeah.
not like I had a glass of wine or two. I was like the life of the party. And I would like to say I still am, but
Yeah.
people were going to notice if I wasn't drinking. Like it just, so I had to have something. And like it really helped me to just prepare for what I wanted to say. And it's totally up to you what you want to say. And I also had my little, like, fun drinks too. I didn't want to just be like drinking a Diet Coke or something like that. Like I wanted to have a cocktail. I wanted to feel like it was a special night and an outing and all of that stuff too. So I'd make sure either the place we were going had something or I had something. I had a plan. And I also, in the beginning, would tell everybody, and I got this from one of the Quit Lit books, I'm doing a 100-day challenge. Like I want to, for health reasons, all of that. And no one asked any further questions. And at the end of 100 days, it was just like, I feel too good. I'm going to keep this going. And again, everybody can understand that. And it just alleviated a lot of those worries that I had.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Did you find anything challenging about quitting?
Oh my gosh, yes.
I'm like, yeah, give me the tips.
I feel like I'm in like a good place. Like there's highs, there's lows. They call kind of coming out of it, you feel like this euphoric, I think they call it like a pink cloud or something like that. And then you kind of dip back down. So it was a wide range of things. I mean, at first it's a habit. So think about any habit. It doesn't have to be alcohol, but you just get in the habit of doing certain things. So it was like full on, it felt counterintuitive to how I was moving through the world to be like, nope, I'm not going to go reach for that glass of wine. Nope. And so you kind of feel like, oh, awkward. And what am I supposed to do with myself? And so I don't like the feeling of, well, I don't like being told what to do, but I also don't feel like I like have to like deprave myself of something or deprive myself of something. So replacements really helped early on with like, okay, I'm still gonna have my wine glass, but it's gonna have like, club soda with a little tart cherry juice or something like that, just so I still had that feel. And I still do that even now. Like I love like having a drink in a wine glass and feeling special and like, okay, this feels really good to me. Having those replacements. But a lot of it was hard because it's new. So being out somewhere and just being like, oh my gosh, like, do I like this? Do I even like going out anymore? Do I even like being in these
Yeah.
situations? And what I would say to somebody is you really just focus on one day at a time at that point, because it's going to feel different like 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 7 months. Like it really does start to feel so different, to the point where then you don't even know what day you're on, or it just feels this is your new normal, and it's not boring, and it doesn't feel like someone's telling you can't do something. And that was my biggest worry. I was like, is the rest of my life I'm going to feel like I'm staring at a cocktail menu like I can't have any of these. And that is not at all how I feel. I get excited for a nice cocktail. I drink probably more water than I ever did. But I don't feel like I'm missing out because
Mm.
of all the work that I've done along the way to really understand like scientifically what it's doing to your body, what it did to me personally. It's not it's not something that I crave or want anymore, which I, at my position when I first started this, would really, really want to hear that because I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh, I'm just going to feel a good example. If moms are on here and they, during pregnancy, you abstain from alcohol, that it's such a different feeling than that. Like that felt like, oh, I can't have that. And I'm just waiting until I get to the end of this. And oh, I'm looking forward to that glass of wine once I can get there. And what it's not that feeling. It's really, really different than that. So I would just, as an encouragement, it feels like freedom, to be perfectly honest. Like it just isn't something that's on my mind. It's not
Yeah.
something is a cloud over me. It's just something that's a non-issue for me. And there's so much freedom in that.
Yeah. I love that. And that's really encouraging for people because I know that, like, especially at the very beginning, based on like my conversations with Cody, is that, yeah, at the very beginning, it's really hard because you do get into these routines and there's certain things that will trigger you. Like you said, like having a glass of wine when you're making dinner. So then when you go to make dinner and you're not drinking, it's like, that's like, that was your habit that you did. Now, what do you do? Do you get a glass of water? Do you not drink anything? Like, what does that look like? And so, but once you're able to like kind of get out of those patterns, it does get easier. I know for him, I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I know for him, like there's still like a couple things. Like we just went on this cruise, and when we were younger, before we had kids, like when we would go on trips, we would just like go balls to the wall, like drinking. And it's like you don't do that in your 30s, but it was like a little triggering to him, where it was like kind of took him back to that time. He's like, I know I don't want to drink, and I'm not going to drink, but it just like kind of sparks those memories of like, this is how I used to vacation. Now how do I vacation without drinking, and having to like kind of relearn that.
Totally. There's a lot of
Yeah.
relearning. And, or I think what I posted the other day was like unlearning, because it's like, okay, this isn't, and it makes sense, right? Like what served me in my 20s, it makes sense that like as I'm about to go into my 40s, which, oh my gosh, it's probably not going to serve me there, right? Like in my, I'm
Yeah.
out in the Hamptons, I'm doing all these things. Like that's not my life now. And I have all those memories, and I don't want to look back. Like there are definitely some like cringe memories, but like I want to look back and be like, okay, I did it. Like that served a certain time in my life. I have no judgment for people that are still drinking, whatever their journey is. I simply was, I mean, I felt like I was in a prison of my own making from, feeling awful and feeling like I needed this and feeling like I needed it for social situations or to have fun or to vacation or what. And I would feel awful. And so if anybody's feeling like that, like the whole reason I'm putting this out there, and it's pretty personal, is because I didn't have that necessarily at that point to know you qualify. Like you're
Yeah.
good. You can do this. And it's not this boring, deprived, always wishing you could. No, not at all. And so, yeah, hopefully that helps somebody who might be kind of thinking over it a little bit.
Yeah, I think it probably will. And I love that we're just in this time where it doesn't have to be like there's a spectrum of like who doesn't want to drink, and it's socially acceptable. I feel like, and you kind of mentioned this before, like, but when you go out to restaurants, I mean, there's usually several mocktails on there. And I know that I see a lot of advertisements on Instagram about mocktails and non-alcoholic wine and beer, so that when you're in those social settings, you can still kind of like participate in that, and not feel like you're an outcast.
Totally.
Um, yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about how alcohol affected burnout, and then we'll move into more of like the burnout conversation. But did you find that you were using alcohol as like a way to alleviate some of your stress and burnout?
For sure. Both with motherhood and career. So to me, I felt like looking back, this isn't while you're in it, you don't have that kind of clarity. But when I was dealing with a lot of stress, whether it was, motherhood, career, both combination, alcohol had a way of numbing a lot of that. And again, I didn't know this while I was doing it, but in hindsight, so it was numbing it. And so it was this temporary band aid that in the moment, yes, it did help. I can't say it didn't help. But there is a huge backswing where, it would help temporarily. But then, like I said, those mornings or waking up in the middle of the night in a panic, the shame, the guilt, but even overarching that, it was keeping me stuck because instead of, okay, I'm stressed or I'm dealing with a lot of stress from motherhood or career or whatever it may be, instead of sitting in that and then diving into what could potentially make that better, I was numbing, putting a band aid on it, and staying stuck. So it was contributing to the burnout in that I just kept repeating the same cycle over and over. I
Yeah.
understood it was happening. I understood I didn't like the feeling, but it was band aid, band aid, band aid instead of, let's dig into this discomfort a little bit. But in the end, you're going to end up with a result that's going to be lasting and not keep you in this cycle.
Yeah. What ways did you kind of deal with burnout and being overwhelmed with kids? I know I feel that a lot. As a mom, a working mom, I feel overwhelmed. I feel like I'm constantly rushed. So what alternative ways did you use to de-stress when you decided to quit alcohol?
Yeah, I mean, I had to I dove into this like I was studying how to take care of yourself, studying burnout. I mean, I went all in. And that's essentially what my whole program is that I offer is going through these different categories that to me were the most important for figuring out how to take better care of yourself. Because it's not just one, oh, okay, like spa day, right? And I used to
Yeah.
like my eyes. The idea of self care, I seriously used to roll my eyes and be like, first of all, I have no time. Second of all, I don't
Yep.
have time. I don't want a bubble bath. And so by diving into this and really researching it, I figured out, okay, that is not what self-care is, right? It's more like for one instance, boundaries. Like that was something I didn't even realize I was absolutely terrible at. And a lot of it is digging, kind of looking back, almost all the way back to childhood and how you were raised and what, expectations of you or what different, I don't know, things were put on you, labels, I guess. And so I just realized like I was raised to be a polite little girl and saying no or declining like that was just, oh, how rude, or who does she think she is, or whatever it may be. And I had to really work through that and understand that by declining or taking time for yourself or putting up some of those boundaries is not at all rude. It is like the kindest thing that you can do for yourself and your loved ones. You need to protect yourself. And so that's just like one example, but there's a lot around that. I mean, as a mom, one of the biggest things, asking for and accepting help, tremendously hard for me. And that has been something that I would say is night and day from when I was really, really struggling until now, of understanding I can't do all this by myself and I shouldn't. And it's perfectly fine to accept help and understand that that doesn't make you a bad mom. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't, nothing like that. And that can look a variety of different ways. Everybody has a little bit of a different family setup and might be easier or more difficult, but it could be from your partner or family or someone that you're able to bring in to help. And for me, I had to allow that because I was just taking on, taking on, taking on, and not leaving any time for myself to really rest and take care of myself.
Yeah, it's really hard. Both of those things are really hard for me, giving up control because I'm like you, where I'm a very type A personality. I love having control. And so it's hard to ask for help or delegate something to someone else and then allow them to do it in their own way.
Mhm.
Even things, it's like silly to even say, but just like the way that Cody unloads the dishwasher or the way that maybe, like just like dumb things. It's like, it doesn't matter. Why does it matter? But it's
No.
like, oh, I'll just do it. Like I can do it faster, or I know where these go,
And
or
like,
whatever.
why would you
Yeah.
let that? Or like, that's not where those dishes go, or that.
Yeah.
And, and it's like, that's exhausting in itself, let alone you're not allowed, like, they're doing that for you so you can step away. When I tell
Right.
you, same exact thing. That's how I felt. Laundry, I'm like, well, nothing's like folded correctly. So I don't think,
Mhm.
oh, so you're going to take back the 8 hours of laundry or whatever every week because it's not folded. Like and it's really, it's untrained and it's like unclench some of that because
Yeah.
there's a reason. And a lot of my coursework again goes back. what is that need for control? Where is that coming from? And a lot of times you need to go back a little bit, understand that, heal that a little bit. That way you can move forward and understand like how all this is going to go together to get that quote unquote balance that we're always kind of striving towards.
Yeah, the other thing that I kind of struggle with is like the way that he does bedtime too. And it's like at the end of the night, if they're both in bed asleep, like what does it matter? Like, okay, maybe he didn't read them, this particular story. Maybe he skipped the bedtime story tonight, or he didn't tickle their back as long as you did. But like in the grand scheme of things, like what does it matter? If that means you don't have to do bedtime, like girl, take it. But it's hard to not get wrapped up in that.
I know. And it's been a journey. It's not something that's like, oh, great, right away. It's something that I have to
Yeah.
continuously, but now I notice. It's like, I think I was just blowing past all like the red flags coming up. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, the dishes are clean or whatever. I was just like, I had blinders on. But now that I understand the benefit and really the necessity to allow that help, I'll go to be like, oh, that's not. And then it's like, I catch myself and I'm like, it's okay though.
Just
You
let
know
it
what I mean?
go. Yeah.
And just let it go. And that's opened up just even mental space. We talk about mental load a lot in motherhood. And, we can talk about it all day and night, but if you're not going to be willing to accept help unless it's absolutely quote unquote perfect, like what are we doing here? Right. So you have to
Yeah.
just, there is some give and take that needs to go.
Yeah, and then the people pleasing thing also resonates with me. I'm very much a people pleaser. My mom is the definition of a people pleaser. She's an amazing woman, by the way, but she has a hard time saying no. And so I feel like because that was modeled to me and I've just grown up seeing her be that person that's just always the go-to person. Like I know I can call my mom up right now and say, "Hey, I need you," and she will be there for me even if she's in the middle of something, right? But how do you create like more of those boundaries around saying no for someone who has been raised to be a people pleaser? Like do you have any suggestions on like a good place to start in setting those boundaries and saying no?
Yes. I mean, a lot of it is practice, to be honest, and understanding why. For me, it's all understanding the why. Like, if you tell me to do something, the first thing I'm going to say is why. Like, I just need to understand and really, because then it'll come naturally and it'll be something that I adopt. I'm not just going to do something because someone says to do it. So that's really how all my curriculum works and everything. It's always getting back to the root of like, okay, why is that difficult for you to do? So for me, the hardest, boundary stuff has been with work. And it's because my self worth and how I felt about myself was so closely tied to my work. Million reasons behind that, but I won't put everything.
Yeah.
But truly understanding that was so critical. And then it was really practice, to be perfectly honest with you, like learning phrases at how, because it was so new to me. I literally didn't even know, well, what's an appropriate way to put up a boundary there. It was all brand new to me, like learning a new language.
Yeah.
And so practicing, and I'll put some of that on my Instagram, or it's definitely in my coursework, but it's around like, here are phrases that are perfectly acceptable, perfectly polite, and if anything, really put you in a great light. And I'll give you one example. So if your manager and is giving you more and more work, so I'm type A personality, high achiever, that's like, okay, this is a workhorse, a worker bee, like I'm going to give her as much as possible. But by, let's say it says, okay, this next thing, like this is top priority, really need to have this done by end of day. By, instead of saying, okay, I'll do that in addition to everything else I was already working on, it's okay, given the scope of this, I already was working on this. So I can either get this done by today, or if this is truly top priority, I can either, allocate this to somebody else or move this till tomorrow. And then I can make this a priority, but like both aren't going to be able to be done by end of day. That's positioning you as an authority over your work, over the time that it takes to complete these tasks. That's showing your expertise, right? So it's changing your mindset. It's not like, oh, I'm pushing back, or, oh, I'm whining, complaining, I can't do this. It's, I understand what it takes for all of this to get involved, and I'm consulting back with you. You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah.
showing that level of professionalism at what can be completed. They don't want something completed that's going to be, rushed together or thrown together. So it's just kind of changing your mindset around that and understanding what setting these boundaries really means once you take away your personal, kind of what might be triggering for you by setting those boundaries.
Yeah, and I feel like this probably affects women. I'm making an assumption here, more than men, because I would imagine most women or more women are more of the people pleasers, and then also being a woman like in the workforce and working for, a company. You're a little bit more afraid, I would say, to say no because you feel like I don't know why, but you just feel like you can't really do that.
Yeah, it's a
And so I
variety of reasons.
Yeah. Like, it's
I mean,
almost like you have to prove yourself. Like,
oh,
so you wanna be
100%.
the go-to person.
Yeah, you're the underdog, right? Like generally speaking, in all the industries that I've worked in, I've been one of, if not only the only female. And automatically you already feel like you have to prove yourself and do a little bit more and show that you belong at the table and you deserve that seat. And also you're so worried of coming across, I don't know if I can say this, coming across like a bitch, because it's like
Yeah.
anytime, and it's the same, you know what I mean? It's like a guy could say that and it's like, oh right, got it, and then I go, whoa, okay, you don't want to do that, so then you like do a little bit more so you're over the top nice so no one will think. I could go on
Yeah.
and on, but all
Yeah.
of that factors into it. And so it's again unlearning that and really understanding what does it mean to set this boundary and how to set that and practicing it, and it can be done for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I need to learn more of these boundaries. What suggestions do you have for someone who maybe like me, like I work for myself. I'm my own manager. Like I'm in charge of my day. And while that does sound great, and it is, like it's definitely a privilege, it's really hard to set boundaries. I work from home. I worked from home even before, but I work from home and often I feel like my job is like a 24/7 job, but that it's not starting, it has been affecting like my personal life and my time with my kids and my nights and my weekends. But it's also however much work you put into your business is almost like what the return that you get. And so you do feel that pressure that you have to constantly be working. Like every free second I feel like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z for my business or go to my to-do list. So I end up not taking care of myself or having days off or anything like that. Where's a good place to start for boundaries for someone in that with that type of work?
Yeah, I would keep in mind that yes, what you put in, you get out. Absolutely. However, if you push yourself to the level of burnout, that's not going to be good for your business either, right? So we have to think about this in like a sustainable way. What is going to be a sustainable way for you to run the business? I completely resonate with you. My go-to stance was work, 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 work. Like as much as I could work, I would work. And every single time I'd burn out. So a really hard lesson I had to learn is you need to understand what you need as a person first, right? So is it rest? Is it time with your family? Is it, and how much? And what does that look like? And really diving into that. And then how does work fit in alongside that? So think about like a schedule. And okay, I understand that like for me to be operating my best, I need to have the time in the evening to cook dinner, to spend that with my family, to unwind with my husband and watch a movie or whatever it might be. And I understand that there are busier times too, right? So, like, that would be kind of like your standard go to week. Now, let's say you're going up against a launch or you have a big event that's going to look different that week, and that's okay. But then I would also counterbalance that with, okay, I just had a big week and I was traveling that whole time and I was on stage and everything like that. Well, then the next week, you need to counterbalance that and spend some time with your family and resting or in bed watching Bravo. And that's kind of what I would do.
Yeah.
But like
I
there
love
has,
Bravo.
I know, oh my gosh. It has to be a give and take there, right? And so I think you just really, it's understanding what you need and then being able to back into your work schedule that way. It's not being on call 24/7. That is not going to be like, that's not going to make or break your business either. Do you know what I mean? So it's like really having
Yeah.
great boundaries of, this is when I answer Instagram DMs. This is when I'm answering emails. And then at a certain point, that those don't get answered and
Yeah.
they will be picked up the next day. And there's just going to be a level, I think, also of confidence that comes along with that, that you have control over that, that you are creating the life and the work life balance that works for you. That's again sustainable,
Yeah.
because you burn yourself out. Great, you built this, it got so far in your business, and then you completely burn out, and then where do you go from there? So it's really the
Right.
sustainable piece that you should be focusing on.
Yeah, I know. I know this like logically, but it's so hard to get yourself out of those routines. Like one thing is I know that I shouldn't look at my phone first thing in the morning. When I pick it up, my alarm goes off. I don't look at Instagram. Like, what are you doing? Like, I know that. And I'm like literally thinking it as I'm like pulling up the app, but I keep doing it. It's just like one of those like routines that you get stuck into. So,
Um, I mean, I have a whole section on unhealthy coping mechanisms, and I
yeah.
try to do with alcohol. Not that it's at the same level, but you get in these habits, and it's not serving you. You know that this isn't, and it's just like, okay, so what steps can I take to see how I can improve this a little bit? Is it leaving your phone in the room next to you, and you have an old fashioned alarm clock there that's
Yeah.
what you need, or just kind of seeing what those small shifts might feel like. A lot of people, like in that section I've talked to, it's like shopping. They just, it's so at our fingertips now, and it's like they get so stressed, and it's just like all of a sudden all these boxes are showing up, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this
I
is getting
relate.
out of control. Yeah, yeah. And so it's like, okay, what is underneath that though? It's always that extra digging to see, okay, what's causing that? What is that feeling that, oh, I need to check this, or what, like, where is that coming from? And is there
Yeah.
a way to get in touch with that, heal it in some way, and then figure out a way to just a small step in a direction towards making that a little bit better. I'm the biggest proponent of small shifts. Like that's, I
Mm.
think, what leads to like the biggest impact and lasting impact are small little shifts that then you can, kind of keep up with over time, rather than like something drastic that feels, not sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. Love that. I want to talk a little bit more about self care. You kind of mentioned it. That self care isn't always. It's like not going to the spa, or like maybe you don't want to take a bath. Like that doesn't really do anything for you. What are
Yeah.
some of your favorite things to do for self care?
Yes. So, one of the things, especially after cutting out alcohol, I felt like I needed to do something with my hands. Like, I just felt, I don't know, I would have like a lot of anxiety or just this like nervous energy. And so, what I started doing was coloring. And I have these gel pens. They remind me of when we were like little in school, and I loved gel pens. And I just color these like beautiful designs and all this stuff, and I listen to podcasts or an audio book, and it's truly a way to just unwind. I'm not thinking about things so much. That's not like rolling around in my head. I'm focused on the story or the podcast or whatever it may be. So that's one way that I can, really relax and kind of downshift out of an, evening or stressful day or something like that. And then also being outside. And I know it sounds cliche and everybody tells you that, but even if I'm on a stressful call or I have a long workshop that I'm doing or something like that, to just step outside, no shoes on, put my feet in the grass and just stand there. It's a couple minutes, has a way of like really grounding me and just kind of getting myself out of that chaotic, rumination, spinning, thinking about all the things that you need to do. So a lot of it's just slowing down and just taking care of yourself and being kind to yourself. It's like, I don't know, I feel like I've just been so hard on myself for a lot of my adult life. And I'm just starting to realize the importance of being kind to yourself and doing nice things for yourself. And it has a way of compounding that you get some of those negative thoughts. They got to push aside over time.
Yeah. Just thinking like a little bit more about like self-care. I know one thing that's really hard for me is that I don't have a lot of time as a busy working mom. My kids are young also. They're 6 and 4. So I feel like we're almost getting out of that stage where they're a little bit more independent. My 6-year-old definitely is. But my 4-year-old needs me a lot. And so self-care is really hard because you don't have a lot of time and maybe you don't have, a lot of family support. So what other tips or like suggestions you have for like a mom maybe who doesn't know, like, I don't know what to do to take care of myself. I don't have a hobby anymore. That's another thing that often happens when you're a mom. You're like, wait, what do I like to do? I don't know. Do you have any suggestions for someone who's trying to figure out like what their thing is that maybe they can do with their kids or in a very short amount of time?
You're hitting on all my things. I have a whole section of my curriculum around creative pursuits. So I feel so strongly about this because I got into my career, became a mom, and I just felt like it was work, work, parent, parent, and just cycle through that. And it was like, wait, I felt like I was losing myself. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't understand. Like, I just felt like a workhorse. And then I would look over at my husband who had a million hobbies. I mean, you name it. You know what I mean? And I was looking
Yeah.
at other dads in the neighborhood and it's like, oh, he has his golf bag. He's just coming back from the golf course. And oh, this one is, having a bunch of people over for the fantasy football draft. And then their hobbies coming out of their ears. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like what is missing here, right? And so I think it is critical, not just like, oh, this is a good idea. I think it is critical for women to make sure that they are making time for creative pursuits in their life, not having to do with their business or their career, not having to do with motherhood, completely separate. And I understand that the challenge that goes along with that, but there are ways of carving around that. It can be something that you are doing with your child in tow. It could be that you do need to ask for that help that is a little bit challenging to do, but it's worth it. Like even if it's a little bit of an investment, the payback that you're going to get from getting that time to go after some of those creative pursuits is tenfold. And in my course, because again, if you were saying this to me before, I probably would have rolled my eyes. So what I did was break down all these statistics for people that are in leadership positions, CEOs, founders, highest earners, all this stuff, and the statistics around what percentage of them have creative pursuits, and it's off the charts, right? So
Mm,
it really leads you to being more creative, more confident, showing up as such a better version of yourself in all areas.
yeah.
So I put together like a little quiz too, just to kind of get you thinking about creative pursuits and what you might like. I always encourage people to think back to childhood because a lot of times that's the last time you allowed yourself to just say, like, what do I like? What do I enjoy? And a lot of times there's something that you can kind of get, map from there. Like I said, with the gel pens, it was seriously just this moment where I saw them in a store and I was like, I loved gel pens. And then I'm coloring and I'm literally so happy. It just brings me this like ease or like I look forward to it. And that's just a small one that you can do at home next to your 4-year-old as they're like
Yeah.
getting ready for something like that, or they're coloring and you're coloring, or putting them to bed and you maybe going to hang out for a little bit until they fall asleep, whatever it might be. You can carve out little times and spaces, whether it's at home or finding something outside. I talked to somebody who used to ride horses. It's like, well, what happened to that? Well, it sounds so obvious as an outsider, but people are like, well, I don't know. I don't have time for that or whatever. But we figured out a way that she could get back to horseback riding. And it's just like this
Yeah.
incredible feeling to have that for yourself. There's a ripple effect that happens with.
Yeah, someone mentioned to me this morning in my DMs because I had mentioned that yesterday, I was just like emotionally regulating myself and then my 4-year-old like all day. So I was just like very exhausted and kind of excited for them to be at daycare today. So I didn't have to do that. But someone had mentioned to me like that they sit down with their child and they color with them because that kind of helps slow things down. They put on music that they like to listen to and they recommended an artist that's like kind of more calming music.
Yeah.
And funny enough, last night we were coloring as well. And then it blew up into like this thing. She was like mad at her sister for taking her coloring marker
Oh,
or whatever.
okay.
But like it does kind of help, like the coloring aspect, but even just maybe finding like little pockets of time when everyone's feeling a little bit dysregulated or overstimulated to try to find those things. Do you work with clients one-on-one or do you have you have the course, but do you also do the one-on-one coaching?
Yes. So I have the video course, and a lot of the reason behind that was because I'm working with moms that their schedules are kind of all over the place, or they don't really have time, or when they do have time, it's like 10 o'clock at night. So I thought the video course was like a great way that you can kind of go through at your own pace and work through all the curriculum. And then I do one-on-one coaching, kind of more like on demand, I guess. So that would be something, I don't like advertise it on my website or anything like that, but I do one-on-one coaching kind of on a select basis. Again, setting those boundaries because it can get
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah.
so,
You're
so
allowed to say no.
you're allowed to say no. You're allowed to figure out how your schedule looks. But yeah, I do take on one-on-one clients as well.
Awesome. And then can you share with everyone where they can find you?
Absolutely. So I hang out the most on Instagram. So it's Abby Calabrese. So ITS Abby Calabrese. And then I also wanted to share that I opened up one whole section of my course for free. So you can just kind of get an idea of what it's like to walk through it. And the section I opened up was around career alignment. So I talk to a lot of people that are like, oh, I think I have to quit my career, or I think I have to leave my job or whatever. And a lot, sometimes maybe, I've left jobs like crazy. But a lot of times it can be a little like small shifts, like I was talking about, that help better align, your core values with what you're doing in your career, and maybe adding in a little bit or taking out a little bit and finding that better alignment. And so to get that free course, you can go to abbycalabrese.com/register, and then you'll be able to get access to it right away.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to link that in the show notes. You guys can go and get your free section of her course. And I'll link your Instagram as well. But thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I feel like I learned so much, and I feel a little bit more confident that I can create some boundaries. I'm actually, after we get off this call, I'm going to write down some boundaries for myself about my cell phone, stopping work. I'm trying to start creating or structuring my work like a 9 to 5, even though I
Right.
work for myself. I'm like, if I can just do that, I can like clock out and then just
Right.
be a mom. Like that's what I want to do because it's a lot. So anyway, I appreciate all the advice. And then go give Abby a follow and check out her course and go to the show notes for all those links. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you so much.